Hola amigos, amigas, pues en el contexto de estas entrevistas que estoy sacando con motivo del festival STARMUS, en el que estuve el año pasado y que va a tener lugar en La Palma próximamente, en el mes de abril, a finales del mes de abril, pues les comparto esta entrevista en la que tuve el honor inmenso y el grandísimo privilegio, para mí fue un verdadero honor, de hablar con unas personas que yo más admiro. Él se llama Kip Thorne, él es un científico brillante, es uno de los padres del concepto moderno de agujero negro, vivió en la era dorada de la cosmología y de la relatividad general, fue compañero de Stephen Hawking, pudo colaborar con grandes científicos como Roger Penrose y desde luego que bueno, forma parte de esas pocas figuras actualmente que nos recuerdan a la ciencia del pasado, cuando la ciencia era hecha de forma individual por esas personas que todos reconocemos, ¿no? Newton, Einstein, Curie. Bueno, es de los pocos grandes científicos que nos recuerda a esa época dorada. Y además una persona que, como digo, pues es un auténtico referente para todos los científicos y en particular para los que amamos el tema de la relatividad general y muy en concreto pues los agujeros negros. Así que es una auténtica leyenda de la ciencia y para mí es pues un honor hablar con él. Por cierto, además, tiene otro de los honores que tiene es el de ser Premio Nobel de Física por el descubrimiento de las ondas gravitacionales, pero también tiene un honor muy interesante y es que es el padre de la película Interstellar. Si hoy la película Interstellar existe, es muy en parte porque se le ocurrió a él la idea de la película y después de mucho tiempo pues consiguió que llegara a la gran pantalla esta historia que nos cuenta Christopher Nolan y todo su equipo. Así que como ven, un personaje muy completo que además me llamó mucho la atención por su humanidad, por su cercanía, me concedió una hora de su tiempo de forma súper amable y la verdad que no puedo estar más agradecido por este regalo, así que muchas gracias a STARMUS por darme esta oportunidad. Y espero que puedan disfrutar tanto la entrevista como yo lo hice. Esto es testimonio histórico, hablar con este gran genio que nos deja estas palabras acerca de su forma de entender la física y entender el universo. Así que ahora tienen una horita maravillosa para disfrutar de esta entrevista que tuve con este gran genio, Kip Thorne.
So thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Hub.
In your books, you say you are a lonely person.
Yes, I like to sit quietly by myself and think.
And think, what is the thing about the universe that come again and again to your brain?
How beautiful it is, what a challenge it is to understand it. How can we understand it better?
And any object is like, do you have like a favorite object of the universe?
Well, I think black holes quite generally because they are so rich in what they can do if they're not just sitting there quietly.
You are a cosmologist, and in the book you say that there is a quote saying that cosmologists they are grown sometimes, but they never hesitate. Do you agree with this sentence? It's in the introduction. It's not by you, but someone else. So the question is, do you agree? And what?
No,
is the
I
quote?
disagree. I hesitate a lot. So there's another saying that I got from my PhD advisor at Princeton, John Wheeler. He said the best physicists are the ones who make the most mistakes the most rapidly on their way to the truth. So I hesitate frequently because I realize I'm making continual mistakes. So I'm not as rapid as I should be making mistakes because I stop and think about the mistakes for a while.
This is a way to get closer to the truth. But then intuition plays some role in your work, intuition or even faith.
Well, intuition plays a huge amount of role, huge role in my work. The laws of physics are written in the language of mathematics. For me, and I think for most physicists, mathematics is slow. The calculation to figure something out takes quite a while if it's something deep, and so we need some way to tell us what calculations are worth doing, and that's intuition. For me, intuition is based on pictures, and so I carry along with the mathematics pictures in my head of what the mathematics is representing, and I can much more quickly make guesses, often good guesses, about what's going on in the universe with the pictures, and only later verify it with mathematics.
You're also famous for your bets.
Oh, yes.
So intuition can be so strong that you can call it faith or something like this?
I think you could call it faith, but as a physicist, I'm always prepared to be shown wrong. Mm-hmm. I always hope, in some sense, to be proved wrong if the issue is something deep in physics, because if I'm proved wrong, then that's going to teach me something very different than what I have believed previously. And so faith, I think, is not a very good way of describing it in my case, because there is always the being prepared and in some sense hoping that I'm wrong.
There is a famous quote by Einstein saying that the equivalence principle was his cleverest idea or happiest idea. What has been your happiest idea in your life?
Well, my happiest idea in my life? I think the happiest idea in my life has been a general principle that I realized early in my career. Always watch for unexpected opportunities, something very different than what I had done before, and think about them and maybe take those opportunities. So I never planned to work on the search for gravitational waves, but an unexpected opportunity came along and I completely changed my career and did that. I never planned to work on movies in Hollywood, but an unexpected opportunity came along. I dated a woman in Hollywood.
Yeah.
She asked me out on a date. She was a physics groupie, Linda Obst. She was a movie producer. And that got me connected to Hollywood. And then one day she phoned me up and said, would you like to brainstorm with me for a movie? And that changed my life.
Yeah. In fact, I'm impressed by the fact that you say in the books that you don't like competition. You're always trying to avoid it. But then, by avoiding competition, you go to the gravitational waves.
Yes. I don't mind small amounts of competition, but I want to have elbow room. I want to be able to work on something for a long time if I need to in order to make progress without some fear that somebody else will come in and solve the whole problem after I've spent many months or many years on it, and I made no progress. I like to have room to explore without worry.
You also said that Hawking's mind and yours were different. I imagine all the great people you met are different intelligences. How do you compare them?
Well, different people's minds work differently. Hawking, of course, he began, before he lost the use of his hands, doing deep and complicated mathematics in connection with physics. As he gradually lost the use of his hands, and he was with me at Caltech during that period. He came to Caltech for a year in 1974-75. As he lost the use of his hands, he began to develop a way of doing physics in his head through manipulating geometric and topological shapes in his head. And those are the things that he used to make his biggest discoveries, these mental manipulations of mathematical symbols in the form of shapes and pictures. And he was so much better at that than anyone else in the world that he was able to make discoveries no one else could make. He had this unique tool that arose out of his physical disability. I don't have that ability.
You also mentioned your mentor, John Wheeler.
John Wheeler.
He is famous for impressive ideas like Eat from Beat or the choice experiment,
Yes.
retarded choice. What are your views of these two ideas?
Well, It from Bit is his view that, in some sense, logic, mathematical logic, underpins reality. I have no idea whether that's true. I don't understand that idea. And so I'm agnostic about that idea. What was the other one you mentioned?
Retarded choice.
Yeah, and so I think that's a very deep idea, that the fact that you can, after an experiment begins, after you think that you have lost all causal capability of influence it, you can do something that does influence the outcome, but it's deep. It tells us that basically that reality is much deeper and much more surprising in its structure than we expect. Causality is, and I find this one very, very, very deep and impressive.
Uh-huh. In fact, you have a chapter called "What is Reality?"
Yeah.
in this book. But in the same chapter, you didn't answer the question like, what is reality in the end for you? Does it exist?
In this chapter, I explained that there are many different versions of reality that we as humans may at first light initially think are very different. But then we discover, as physicists, that they're equivalent. And so there are two approaches to Einstein's laws of relativity of warped space-time. One is an approach that says space and time really are warped, and that we live in a world where space and time are geometric entities, and the geometry of them, the shapes of them, are central to their very nature. And there's another approach which says that no, space and time are pretty ordinary, but our measuring sticks, our rulers, the light rays we use to study them, they are the things that go crazy, not space and time. And this is sometimes called a field theory and flat space-time point of view, but it's just two very different ways of thinking about the nature of space and time. And yet, when you dig deep down, you discover they are completely equivalent in their predictions, give the same prediction, but they carry completely different understanding of the nature of reality. So that tells me that that there's something very deep about reality that goes much deeper than, I believe, the way we normally think about reality.
Mm-hmm. You're also working in black holes, and one of the questions of the book is what happens with the matter that enters the black hole. What are your views about it?
I think so. We know with pretty high confidence that there are three singularities inside a black hole, three places where the laws of physics as we know them fail. One of them is very chaotic singularity, very destructive. You fall into it and you get stretched and squeezed until your body is torn apart. Then the atoms of which your body is made get stretched and squeezed until they are distorted beyond all recognition. Space and time get stretched and squeezed. And then we don't know what happens, but the laws of quantum gravity, we call them, take over. But there's no way we're ever going to survive this if we fall in a black hole. There's another two singularities that are much more gentle. And it's conceivable, but I think not likely, that if you hit one of those singularities, that you survive, but what happens to you after that isn't at all clear. We don't know. So the bottom line is, we don't know for sure, but I don't think I'll do the experiment.
But in the end, we have a mystery about what happens with the matter that enters the
In the end, we have a mystery of what happens to the matter. The matter probably gets destroyed beyond recognition, and a new form of reality controlled by these quantum gravity laws that we don't understand well takes over for the matter. But since we don't understand those laws at all well, we cannot yet make predictions.
But in the end, black holes and Big Bang are like complementary, and they have all both mysteries about what is beyond.
In the end, the center of a black hole and the beginning of the Big Bang are both controlled by these laws of quantum gravity. They are both mysteries. In some sense, the inside of a black hole is like the Big Bang turned around in time. So as you go into the center of the black hole to its singularity, there's no way to get out, and you hit the singularity. If you're near the Big Bang, there's no way to go back to the Big Bang and see it. It's opposite behavior, time reverse behavior, in some sense. But in reality, I think it's really quite different. It is that one may be chaotic and the other not chaotic. The singularity, the main singularity inside a black hole is very chaotic. The Big Bang was probably not very chaotic.
And what is your view about what was before the Big Bang?
I don't know.
No idea? No guess?
Oh, there are lots
Intuition?
of guesses. All of my particle physics friends who specialize in this kind of thing, they have their guesses. I'm an agnostic. They're smarter than I am. They have thought about it much longer than I have. I haven't thought about it very much because that's a very crowded field. The people who work in it, there's so many people working on this because in some ways it's the hottest question in physics. I don't like working in something where everybody else is working. So I'll let them all tell you their ideas, and I'll sit back and listen and admire them, but choose to work on something else.
Then you devote a lot of time to think about time reversal or going back to time. What are your views? Do you think it will be possible in the future to go back in time?
I don't know. and there I have thought about it a lot, as have a few other people. The thing that I find most impressive is something that came out of an analysis that I did with a postdoctoral student of mine named Sungwon Kim from Korea, who came to Caltech, spent a couple of years at Caltech. And Stephen Hawking did some similar work, and a few others did. But we have found a mechanism whereby it might be that whenever a very advanced civilization builds a time machine and first turns the time machine on, the machine explodes to prevent going backward in time. And Stephen Hawking, and I argued over this quite a bit. This is the only time Stephen and I were close personal friends. This was the only time in our careers that we worked on the same problem at the same time. We always were working on something different. So here we had some arguments over a period of about a year and a half. And in the end, we agreed on the answer, and that is that the answer is controlled by these same laws of quantum gravity that control the birth of the universe in the core of a black hole. Those same laws control the issue of whether or not the explosion that we do agree always occurs when you try to turn on a time machine. It's a very general feature of turning on a time machine. Whether the explosion destroys the time machine so you can't go backward in time, or does not destroy the time machine and you can go backward in time, the answer is controlled by these same quantum gravity laws. So we're stuck. The quantum gravity laws control the deepest questions in physics: backward time travel, the birth of the universe, the core of a black hole.
Did you also work with quantum physics in depth, like trying to unify?
I never worked trying to unify quantum physics with relativity, but to study this issue of this explosion required I use something called, to use a technical physicist term, quantum physics, quantum field theory in curved space-time. So it's a first step toward quantum gravity, a step that we are confident is accurate for many problems that involve quantum physics in the real universe, but is not adequate when things get really extreme. And then you have to have the full laws of quantum gravity that we don't really understand. So I used, and Stephen used this first step toward quantum gravity as the tool to discover this explosion. But then it turned out the explosion got to the point where we needed full quantum gravity, and we threw up our hands and agreed privately that the answer is controlled by laws that we don't understand. But then Stephen went beyond what I was willing to do. He said, I hereby proclaim, he said, a conjecture that all time machines will always self-destruct when you try to turn them on. He regarded this as protecting the universe for historians of every species, so you can't go backward and change history.
There is a quote by Einstein saying that science without religion is lame, and I think it's really controversial, but what is your view about it?
Well, let me tell you a personal history. So I was born into a family in a small town in Utah. All of my ancestors on all genealogical lines, my father's grandparents, my mother's grandparents, all going back in all directions in the past, they all moved to Utah, joined the Mormon church, moved to Utah before the railroad got there, so they all went on foot or in wagons pulled by horses or riding on horses. Back in around 1849, 50, 1855, in that period. And so I was deeply tied to this Mormon culture. And as I grew up and started to learn about science, I realized that science, the laws of physics, were far more powerful in telling me things about how the world works. Things that I could then use, and they really were powerful in both understanding and through technology and making life better for people, far more powerful than religion. So I just simply lost interest in religion because at least the religion that I grew up with didn't have anything like the power that the laws of physics had, and an understanding of the laws of physics. So I don't understand Einstein's view of this, but maybe it's because my view of religion is different from his. But I find religion not interesting for me, though I very much respect other people's view of religion, desire for religion, and what it does for them in their lives, but it doesn't do anything for me.
And philosophy, because it also helps to tackle the same questions, but people like Hawking didn't like it very much.
In some sense, philosophy is part of physics. How do we understand what the physical laws are saying? We build up physical intuition through pictures and viewpoints on understanding the laws of physics, things that go beyond the pure mathematics. And so I'll tell you another story. Richard Feynman, who is one of the great theoretical physicists that I knew personally, he was a professor at Caltech. I was a student there. I went to him to talk with him about philosophy because I had started to read some books on philosophy of science. And he told me that philosophy was not of any use and I shouldn't be wasting my time reading these books on philosophy of science. So I went away to Princeton. I studied with John Wheeler. I came back to Caltech on the faculty. And Feynman had just given some lectures at Cornell that were embodied in a little book about the character of physical law. And I was asked to write a book review at Caltech of Feynman's new book, The Character of Physical Law. Feynman and I had become acquainted again. We were becoming good friends. I opened this book. My gosh, it was all about the philosophy of science. That's why I went to him. I said, "You told me when I was a student that philosophy was useless, but your book is totally about the philosophy of science." What's going on here? He just smiled. Philosophy, at least one branch of philosophy, is central to how I do research as a physicist. It's a version of philosophy that is tied tightly into the laws of physics, but it's a way of thinking about the laws of physics that has great power, and that much of which I learned from Richard Feynman, who told me philosophy was useless.
Which branch of philosophy are you doing?
Well, so for example, there is a book. Again, while I was at Princeton, I sat in on a class, I wasn't taking it, by a philosopher or historian of science about the structure of scientific revolution by somebody named Thomas Kuhn.
Yeah.
Thomas Kuhn was a historian and philosopher of science who later moved, I think, to MIT, but he was at Princeton at the time. He had not yet published this book, so he was teaching out of a manuscript. And it was all about the difference between normal progress in research in a field, where you're just step by step understanding things a little more deeply, versus the phase in a field of science when suddenly all your ideas are changed, a revolution. And we've gone through such revolutions, the quantum revolution in the 1920s in physics, the relativity revolution that Einstein spearheaded about how we think about space and time. And this is a book on the philosophy of science, basically how you think about those revolutions and how you set your mind in order to prepare for those revolutions and try to make revolutions happen.
Another philosopher that had an important impact in physics by that time was Feyerabend, who was in the States, right?
I'm sorry, who?
Paul Feyerabend.
Yeah, I don't know much about his work.
Well, because he's really controversial. But
no, I don't know much about his work. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm very narrowly educated. I know Thomas Kuhn because I took this course from him, but I'm not well connected in the world of philosophy.
He was a little bit attacking the scientific method, because he says in the past it's not working like this. It's more like intuition, and there is not a certain method that we follow, but it's more chaotic that we pretend.
Well, it's more chaotic during a revolution, but not during normal phases of science. Not at all during normal. So I would say he's partly right there.
Lee Smolin also.
Yeah, I've known Lee since he was a student.
He has a book where he is really critic with the science, how it's done today, because talking about Kuhn, he says we don't have places for people like Einstein where you can think openly and everything is like very narrowly.
Yeah, well, I disagree, at least at some universities, including mine, Caltech. There is certainly places for people who think more broadly, and there's faculty are encouraged to develop their own styles and to pursue things in a different manner than other people do. Certainly I did that myself in many respects, and it was always backed with high respect from my colleagues at Caltech. Now it may be that many universities that's different and that they are more rigid. certainly at Caltech, when I wanted to do something such as working on gravitational waves when that was not a very respectable field, I got, or working on the theory of time travel, when that was not a very respectable topic, I always got full encouragement from my colleagues, whereas my friends at most other universities got much less encouragement. So it depends on the environment, it depends on the institution, it depends on the constellation of people there, but certainly there are places like Caltech that are very open to unconventional approaches.
Coming back to Feynman, he didn't like arts, but in the end he started painting. Another contradiction, right? So
Yes.
you play clarinet? You play saxophone?
I played saxophone and clarinet in a rock band in the 1950s.
Oh, wow.
When rock was new.
And did you get inspiration from music, or was there a good role of music in the universe? Or this is
I don't think I just got pleasure from music.
That's it.
Not so much inspiration. I just enjoyed it very much. I was just very lucky to. Nobody in my family played the musical instrument, but at school somebody came around and said, "We need people to play in the band," and so they said, "Here's a list of instruments." And I randomly picked a clarinet. I didn't know what these instruments were. I didn't know the difference between a clarinet and a trombone. And so I went out and we rented a clarinet, and then I bought one, and I really enjoyed it, and I picked up a saxophone. My parents encouraged it, even though they'd never played instruments. Mm-hmm. But I never had any deep understanding of music. It was just something that was fun.
Then the story of Interstellar is really inspiring. So I'm first really curious about how it came with Sagan. It was a close friend of you, right?
Yeah, Carl and I had been close friends going back to the early 1970s when he would come to Caltech and JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which was in charge of all of the interplanetary missions, the things that went beyond Earth orbit, basically, or the moon. He would come out to Caltech when there were interplanetary missions being run out of JPL because he was deeply involved in that, the exploration of the planets. And he would be there then as a visiting professor at Caltech. And so I got to know him quite well at that time. And so my involvement in Hollywood came through him, since he had his connections to Hollywood.
And then he asked you for help for the movie Contact.
Yeah, he asked me for help with the movie Contact, but before that, he came to me in 1979. Contact is a few years later than that. And he said, there's a young woman who's starting to work on movies in Hollywood, and she would like to have a date with you, a blind date, to come to the world premiere of my TV show, Cosmos. Uh-huh. And so I said, sure. I was single at that time. So I had a blind date with this woman. Her name was Linda Obst. She had been a science editor for the New York Times and had moved to Hollywood with her husband, and then was getting divorced. And so it turned out she, in fact, would become the producer of Carl's movie Contact. And so I had that connection already with Hollywood through Carl and through a blind date with Linda Obst. And so Carl came to me when he had the novel version of Contact the book version. He was close to publishing it, but he had begun to worry about it a little bit because he had his heroine, Eleanor Arroway was the name of the woman in the book, traveling through a black hole to get to a star Vega, another star in our galaxy. And he said, I realize this might not be possible. I need your help. And I told him, no, if she goes into a black hole, she almost surely dies. You should send her through a wormhole. Wormholes were not well known to people at that time, but John Wheeler, who was my PhD advisor, had thought a lot about them in the period when I was a student, and back in the 50s and early 60s. And but I said, Wheeler, with a student, I think it was Fuller, had discovered that wormholes pinch off so quickly you can't travel through them. And so if you're going to use this, you have to have some way to hold a wormhole open so you can travel through it. And so I did a little calculation to just see what was required to hold a wormhole open. It quickly became clear to me, this had been discovered earlier by a guy named Gannon, but I didn't know it at the time. Quickly became clear that if you want to hold a wormhole open, you have to put inside it something that repels gravitationally. What I did know about that most physicists didn't know, was that such material, I call it exotic material, really does exist in the universe. It's due to quantum physics. There are things called vacuum fluctuations. These are, if you have a box and you remove from the box everything that can be removed, what you're left inside is fluctuations of everything that could have been in the box, fluctuating in and out of existence. It's very, very weird, but it appears and then disappears in very random ways, and it has zero energy and doesn't gravitate, or so we believed in the laws of physics were saying. And but it seemed quite clear to me, and I think this is generally accepted by physicists, that if you borrow some of the fluctuations from this region and put them over there, the stuff over here there will be extra fluctuations, and over here that will pull gravitationally, and where you borrowed from will repel gravitationally. It has less fluctuations. This goes under the fancy name renormalization of these fluctuations. But so exotic material is after this renormalization. If you have a reduced amount of fluctuations because it's been loaned somewhere else, it will repel. And so I just told Carl, I wrote him a few pages of notes and said, you need in your novel, they have discovered, some advanced civilization has discovered how to make enough exotic material where the fluctuations are reduced, enough exotic material to repel gravitationally and hold the wormhole open. And so he used that in the novel and had a nice acknowledgement of me at the end of the novel. That's one of the things I'm famous for. I'm particularly famous for being acknowledged in that novel and being on The Big Bang Theory and TV. Those are my great fame. Anyway, so that's how I got into this business of wormholes and exotic matter.
And how was this Carl Sagan in the close? It was a nice experience to work with him.
Oh, I enjoyed him very much.
Funny,
he was one of the nicest people I've known.
Really?
He really a very kind. I mean, you see his kindness, and whenever anybody came around to ask him questions, he always would pause and take the time to answer the questions. And I never saw him be impolite about such things. I mean, he was just a very sweet man.
And then it came your opportunity to do something similar, right? Like your ideas, transform it into art.
So after Carl had cancer at the time that they made the film Contact. He died not long after that movie came out. And a few years after that, since Linda Opes could no longer collaborate with Carl, she had been the producer on Contact. She came to me as a poor substitute, and she said, "Would you like to brainstorm with me for a movie?" And I thought for a tiny fraction of a second and said, "Yes, this is an unexpected opportunity. I'll do this. It will be fun, and perhaps through this, I could have a much bigger influence on young people to inspire them about science than I normally can as just a professor who never works with Hollywood. Yeah. This is just a powerful way to inspire people. So we agreed to do that, and that movie became Interstellar.
It's been 10 years now. You are going to celebrate 10 years of this idea.
That's right. It's 10 years now. The studio is re-releasing Interstellar for another, hopefully, big successful run in theaters. I think this coming autumn, if my memory's right. Yeah.
But since the moment you had the idea till it was recorded, it was like a big span of time. How was the situation for you? How you deal with it?
Yeah, so
frustration and everything.
You know, the movie took about 9 years to come to fruition. That was quick.
Really?
Yeah, I devoted most of my career to trying to help experimental physicists detect gravitational waves. And I spent 50 years, a half a century on that.
Yeah.
This was only 9 years. Nothing. And I learned, particularly in the case of gravitational waves, that if I pick something to do that's fun, then I don't mind if it takes a long time, and I'm willing to work hard on it to make it happen. And the whole process can be joyful. And that was the case also with Interstellar.
What was your biggest challenge in this collision of worlds?
The biggest challenge would have been working with the attorneys. They call them the shirts in Hollywood. They're the people who wear white shirts and ties. Working with the shirts, the attorneys, to deal with the legal aspects of this. Unfortunately, I never had to do that.
Great.
Linda told me at the beginning, if you're going to work on this movie, you have to have an attorney of your own that deals with all of that stuff. And so I went through Caltech, through the trustees to oversee Caltech. I got a recommendation of a superb attorney, and he just dealt with all of that for me, and I never had to think about it. And so actually, I think the whole process was really quite enjoyable. And everybody I dealt with, from people high in the studio executives, through Christopher Nolan, who directed it, the actors, people like Anne Hathaway, and the actors on down, the visual effects people, the man who parked my car when I drove to the studio. Everybody was really enthusiastic about working with a real scientist to make a movie that was based on real science. They hadn't done this before. And the enthusiasm was just amazing from everybody.
Do you identify yourself somehow with the professor? Do you think there is something of you in this role?
When I was there and they were filming, who was it that plays the professor?
Michael Caine?
Michael Caine. See, it's terrible. At my age, I lose names. I lose the name of my son sometimes. I confuse him with my brother. So the first assistant director on the set, when they were filming in the professor's office, came over to me and said, Michael Caine would like to have a picture taken with you. And my jaw dropped. I mean, he was the big star, Michael Caine, playing the professor. And I said, okay. And so Michael Caine came over and we had some pictures taken. And then a little bit later, Michael's wife appeared. I had never met her, sat down beside me, said, hi, I'm Michael's wife. He phoned me and said that you were on set and that I should come meet you. I said, why? I said, and she responded, because Christopher Nolan, the director, says that his character is based on you. Now, Chris never told me that, but that's what he told Michael Caine. And so evidently the professor is based on me, according to Michael.
You say in the book that the work for Interstellar rose new ideas in physics, and even the material was published. So how was this for you, and what are the things that we learned from the movie?
Well, the thing that was most interesting to me was in working on the visual effects together with Paul Franklin, who was the supervisor of visual effects, and with Oliver James, who was the chief scientist at DNEG, or Double Negative, as it was then called, the visual effects house that was doing the visual effects. I worked with them to make the visual appearance of the black hole and the wormhole and matter in the vicinity, hot gas swirling around the black hole, images of light carried by light traveling through the wormhole, make it realistic. And we had to make it realistic by beginning with paintings that were of the hot disk of gas around the black hole, or paintings of nebulae on the other side of the wormhole, created by Eugenie von Tunzelmann, who is the lead artist, and her team. And we had to propagate the light around the black hole or through the wormhole to an IMAX camera and through the IMAX camera. And so we used mathematics to do that propagation. We had a mathematical description of the black hole or the wormhole. And from that mathematical description, we could see how the light rays were bent as they were traveling to the camera. And then by adding up all the light that's carried by these light rays, you can make an image that is precisely what the camera would see. The trouble was that the images that were being made were not smooth. And the reason is that when two light rays coming off of, say, a disk of hot gas running side by side around the black hole, the warping of space and time pries the light rays apart. And so they get very far apart. We need some light rays in between, which we didn't have. And even if you put some more light rays in between, even they get pried apart. The black holes are so extreme in what they do to the light rays that this method that everybody has always used to make such images, it failed. It just would not make smooth images for a movie, for an IMAX movie. And so we had to invent a whole new way of propagating light mathematically around a black hole or through a wormhole. And so we did that. Oliver James and I did that together. In technical language, we propagated Gaussian light beams that overlapped, but that's just a technical detail. But the bottom line was that we created a whole new way of making ultra-high precision images of things in the vicinity of black holes. And since we had done that for the movie, then why not use it for scientific research? After all, my friends who do such computations with supercomputers about how black holes behave when they collide, for example, they're trying to make movies as well. And they have similar problems to this. And so the method we invented for Interstellar is now used by some of my friends when they're visualizing things in their scientific research. And so then also Oliver James and I and the team at Double Negative, we use this for scientific research ourselves in order to understand some strange behaviors of images of things near black holes, what we call gravitational lensing. It's not a huge discovery, but it's really quite beautiful in terms of the things we saw about how light behaves, just very beautiful, and illustrates some very deep principles of physics that, in ways that I've never seen illustrated before.
And for me also how discoveries could come from any work, any thought, any place. But finally, then you watched the movie, and how was your impression?
The movie, it was very moving for me. So I knew, of course, the script of the movie very well. I was an executive producer on the movie. I had worked intimately with Christopher Nolan and with the visual effects people. When I saw the first cut of the movie, it wasn't the final version, I actually cried during it, even though I knew what was coming, because it was so powerful. It really was an emotional experience, seeing the movie. Just marvelous.
Yeah, the scene you like the most, and probably the worst? Or any scene disappointed or like?
There were minor things where the physics wasn't quite perfect, but and so I was disappointed in that. They were things I had not been involved in, but the imperfection of the physics were totally minor compared to any other Hollywood movie I've ever seen. So that was the only thing I was disappointed in. And for example, a spaceship goes past a cloud. The cloud has some solid carbon dioxide in the cloud, and it clips along the cloud, and a bit of the spaceship gets cut off. Well, the problem is that that this solid carbon dioxide segment of the cloud wouldn't have a strong enough enough strength. It would break off in the gravitational field of the planet, but that was totally minor. That was, I think, really the only thing I saw as I watched the movie that upset me. This one tiny, just momentary thing in the movie. Otherwise, the movie, as far as I could see, was perfect.
Were you impressed by Christopher Nolan and how he dealt with the story?
Christopher Nolan is an amazing man. I was really impressed by him. Though it was quite interesting, our attitudes going in. He was afraid I would, I said to him in our first meeting, I said, I would like that in this movie that nothing in the movie will violate well-established physical laws, and all of the speculations will come from science and not just be created by a screenwriter. And he said, well, I think that's great. I would love to make a movie like that as long as it does not get in the way of making a great movie. So I was afraid he was going to go off and do things that were totally wrong with the laws of physics in order to make what he thought was a great movie. He was afraid I would be the science policeman, and I would tell him what he could do and what he couldn't do. And so we went in with neither of us completely trusting the other one. Within a few hours, that completely changed, because we both realized that we wanted to brainstorm together to make a great movie, and that we would work together, and we would each try to find ways to accommodate the other person's goals, and it just became just an absolutely marvelous collaboration, in which I learned a huge amount. So he learned that he should push me, that I could say things like, for example, he told me he wanted that when the people go down to the water planet, which is very near the horizon of a black hole, that 1 hour on the water planet would be equivalent to 7 years back on Earth. I told him that's not possible. If you have a planet orbiting around a black hole, you can never have that much difference in the rate of flow of time. The planet will fall into the black hole. He said, go do a real calculation. Have you done a real calculation? Go do a real calculation and make absolutely sure. I did the real calculation. I was wrong.
Oh, wow.
And so he learned early that my intuition could be wrong.
Uh-huh.
And so every time I told him something that my intuition said, he would say, go do a real calculation, Kip.
A real scientist he was.
And I would do it. Usually I was right, but occasionally I was wrong, seriously wrong. And that was part of the joy of this, of him pushing me in ways that other people would not have pushed me. Uh-huh. And me discovering that something I thought was true wasn't correct. So it was a wonderful collaboration.
And with Matthew, you also mentioned in the book that it was a nice experience with him.
With
Matthew McConaughey?
Matthew McConaughey, yes, it was a great experience with McConaughey. He asked to get together with me to talk about the movie and his role as Cooper in the movie shortly before they began filming. And so we met in a hotel in Beverly Hills, California, where he had removed all the furniture from a very large living room in the hotel. He had a suite. And he had just a love seat, a couch that was shaped like an L. And I sat on one leg of the L, and he sat on the other, and a coffee table. And he had pieces of paper, about this size paper, large pieces of paper, all around on the floor. And at the center of each piece of paper, he had written a question related to the science or philosophy of the movie. And he had written ideas about that all around the outside of the paper, around this question. He would pick up a piece of paper and he would ask me about the black hole and what was going on in the black hole, some question in the middle of it, and we would talk. He would pick up another piece of paper and he would ask me about my philosophy of raising children, because he has his daughter there, and his relationship to his daughter is important. So he knows that I'm a father, and I have a daughter. So and he had notes about raising a daughter written all around it, and it was really so interesting talking with him. And his questions were really fascinating and deep questions about all aspects of the movie, but also about life.
Wow. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, great
Professor.
Pleasure talking. Thank you.
Well, congratulations for these 10 years of Interstellar.
Thank you.
Pues esto ha sido todo. Muchas gracias a STARMUS, a Garik, a Breso, a Alejandro, a Iñaki, a todo el equipo por concederme la entrevista y muy en particular a Kip Thorne por hacerme cumplir este sueño. Muchísimas gracias. Hasta el próximo vídeo, queridos.